It was mid-November and the chill in the air had already turned bitter. I had just moved into a cheap, isolated cabin on the outskirts of a small town in Oregon, looking for some peace and quiet after a chaotic year. The cabin was rustic, with creaky floorboards and a wood-burning stove, surrounded by miles of dense pine forests that felt almost suffocating in their immensity. The first few days were idyllic. I spent my time reading, hiking, and enjoying the profound silence. But by the fourth night, the silence started to feel less peaceful and more expectant. I was sitting by the stove, nursing a mug of tea, when I heard it for the first time. A faint, rhythmic thumping coming from the woods behind the cabin. At first, I brushed it off as an animal or the wind playing tricks on me, but the thumping was too deliberate. Thump, pause. It sounded like heavy footsteps crunching through the frozen underbrush, slowly circling the perimeter of my small property. I turned off the interior lights and peered through the window, but the darkness was absolute. The next morning, I went out to investigate. The frost-covered ground revealed nothing. No footprints, no disturbed brush. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it, a byproduct of my active imagination and the sheer isolation. I spent the day chopping wood, the physical exertion helping to settle my nerves, but as the sun began to set, casting long, menacing shadows across the clearing, the unease returned. That night, the thumping started earlier. I was in the middle of making dinner when the rhythmic sound began again. This time, it was louder, closer. It wasn't just circling the property anymore, it was circling the cabin itself. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and stood perfectly still in the center of the living room, listening intently. The footsteps stopped abruptly right outside my front door. I held my breath, the silence stretching out until it felt tangible. Then a slow, agonizingly deliberate scratch. Something was dragging a sharp object down the wooden exterior of the door. The sound set my teeth on edge. I wanted to yell out, to demand who was there, but my voice caught in my throat. After what felt like hours, the scratching stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a chair facing the door, the iron poker clutched tightly in my hands, jumping at every creak of the settling cabin. When dawn finally broke, I rushed outside. There, carved deeply into the solid oak door, was a single crude symbol. It looked like a jagged, upside-down spiral. I took a photo of the symbol and drove into town later that day, hoping someone could identify it. The local librarian, a frail woman with sharp eyes, blanched when I showed her the picture. She told me it was an old folklore mark, something the early settlers used to ward off the watchers in the woods. She refused to say more and urged me to leave the cabin immediately. I wasn't ready to give up my lease over an old superstition and a vandal. I bought heavy-duty deadbolts and a motion sensor floodlight, determined to catch whoever was trying to scare me. I spent the afternoon installing them, feeling a false sense of security as the bright light illuminated the clearing. I was ready for them this time. The third night was eerily quiet, no thumping, no scratching, just the wind howling through the pines. I managed to fall into a fitful sleep around 2 a.m., but I was jolted awake violently a few hours later. The motion sensor light had been triggered. The blinding white light flooded through my bedroom window, casting harsh shadows across the walls. I crept to the window and carefully peeked out. The clearing was empty. The light stayed on for its programmed 5 minutes before clicking off, plunging the cabin back into darkness. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, probably just a deer, I reasoned. But then the light clicked on again, and this time I saw what had triggered it. Standing at the very edge of the tree line, just where the light met the darkness, was a figure. It was impossibly tall and thin, wrapped in dark, ragged clothing that fluttered in the wind. Its arms hung limply at its sides, extending far past its knees. It wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the cabin, facing my window, facing me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I backed away from the window slowly, terrified that any sudden movement would provoke it. I grabbed the landline to call the police, but the phone was dead. No dial tone, just a hollow silence. I was completely cut off. I checked my cell phone, no service. I was utterly alone. The light clicked off again. The darkness felt heavier now, suffocating. I waited in the dark, straining to hear any sound over the rushing of my own blood in my ears. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The light didn't turn back on. I started to think maybe it had left. Maybe I was safe for the night. That's when I heard the sound coming from the roof. It wasn't footsteps this time. It sounded like something heavy and wet dragging itself across the shingles. A slow, agonizing scrape that moved from the back of the cabin towards the front, right above my head. I stared at the ceiling, frozen in terror. The dragging stopped right over the living room. Then silence. A fine dusting of dirt and old leaves drifted down from the ceiling planks, landing softly on the floor. Something was up there, and it was waiting. I knew I couldn't stay in the bedroom. I had to get to the living room where the fireplace poker was. I slowly turned the doorknob and slipped out, sticking close to the wall. The living room was dark, the only light coming from the dying embers in the stove. I grabbed the iron poker, its weight somewhat reassuring. I looked up at the ceiling. Nothing seemed amiss, but the oppressive feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I stood there, clutching the weapon, waiting for the inevitable. Suddenly, the heavy wooden trapdoor leading to the small attic space above the living room burst open. A cloud of dust descended into the room. I stumbled back, raising the poker defensively. For a long moment, nothing happened, just the gaping black hole of the attic staring down at me. Then, a long, pale, multi-jointed arm slowly lowered itself from the darkness. The arm was grotesque, the skin translucent and stretched tight over bone. It ended in a hand with too many fingers, each tipped with a jagged, filthy claw. It swayed gently in the air as if searching for something. Me, I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by a primal fear so intense it felt physical. Then a face emerged from the attic opening. It was pale and hairless, with eyes that were entirely black, void of sclera or iris. It didn't have a nose, just two slits in the center of its face. And its mouth was a gaping, jagged maw filled with needle-sharp teeth. It smiled down at me, a horrific, unnatural smile. A sound tore itself from my throat, a primal scream of pure terror. The creature moved with horrifying speed. It dropped from the ceiling, landing silently on the wooden floor despite its size. It unfolded itself, standing easily 8 feet tall. It lunged at me, its long arms outstretched. I swung the iron poker with everything I had. It connected solidly with the side of the creature's head with a sickening crack. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and stumbled back. I didn't wait to see if it was seriously hurt. I scrambled for the front door, fumbling with the heavy deadbolts I had installed. The creature recovered quickly. I could hear its wet, heavy footsteps rushing towards me. I finally threw open the door and bolted out into the freezing night. I didn't look back. I ran towards my car, parked near the edge of the property. I practically dove into the driver's seat, locking the doors behind me. I jammed the key into the ignition, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. The engine roared to life. As I threw the car into reverse, my headlights illuminated the front of the cabin. The creature was standing in the open doorway. It wasn't pursuing me. It was just watching me leave. But the truly terrifying part wasn't the creature in the doorway. It was what was standing behind it. Emerging from the shadows of the living room were 2 more of them. They moved with the same jerky, unnatural gait, joining the first creature at the door. 3 pairs of solid black eyes stared at me as I sped backward down the driveway. I drove like a madman, not caring about the icy roads or the darkness. I didn't stop until I reached the next town, parking my car in the brightly lit lot of an all-night diner. I sat there until the sun came up, shaking uncontrollably. When the local police finally agreed to escort me back to the cabin to gather my things, we found it completely empty. The door was wide open, just as I had left it. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no creatures. The only evidence that anything had happened was the heavy iron poker lying on the floor, bent almost completely in half. The police thought I was crazy or on drugs. I didn't care what they thought. I packed my car in under 10 minutes. As I was driving away for the last time, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The motion sensor light above the cabin door clicked on, even though it was broad daylight, and for a split second, I swear I saw a tall, thin shadow standing just inside the tree line, watching me, waiting for someone else to come looking for some peace and quiet. I never went back to Oregon. I moved to a busy city, living in a high-rise apartment where the sounds of traffic drown out the silence. But even now, years later, I still sleep with the lights on, because sometimes when the city quiets down in the dead of night, I can hear a faint, rhythmic sound. Thump, pause, thump, pause. It always seems to come from the hallway outside my door, and I know with absolute terrifying certainty that if I ever look through the peephole, I'll see a pair of solid black eyes staring back at me. They never stopped watching, they just learned how to follow. This experience changed everything about how I view the world. We like to think we are at the top of the food chain, that the shadows hold nothing but the absence of light. But the woods are old, and they hide things that are far older, things that don't belong in our reality. The librarian's words often echo in my mind, the watchers in the woods. I've tried researching it, looking for similar encounters. You'd be surprised how many missing persons cases in remote areas share unsettling similarities. Abandoned campsites, doors left wide open, strange symbols carved into wood. I share this story not to frighten you, but as a warning. If you ever seek isolation, if you ever feel the pull of the deep, silent forests, be careful, pay attention to the quiet, because sometimes the silence isn't empty, it's just waiting for you to notice it. And if you ever hear a rhythmic thumping in the night or a slow scratching at your door, don't investigate, don't turn on the lights. Just lock your doors, hide and pray that whatever is out there decides to move on, because once they know you can see them, they never truly let you go. To this day, the sight of deep woods fills me with a cold dread. Even pictures of dense forests make my skin crawl. The memory of that pale, multi-jointed arm reaching down from the attic is burned into my retinas. It's a primal fear that I can never fully articulate. I've considered going back just once with an armed group to see if the cabin is still there, to see if the symbol is still carved into the door, but I know it's a foolish idea. Whatever resides in those woods is territorial, and it already marked me. Going back would just be offering myself up. So I stay in the city. I endure the noise, the crowds, the smog. I welcome the artificial lights and the concrete barriers. They feel like a fortress, a very fragile fortress, but a fortress nonetheless. It's the only place I feel even remotely safe. But the safety is an illusion. The creatures didn't just exist in that specific forest. They exist in the spaces between our understanding. They are the things that go bump in the night, the monsters under the bed, the shadow in the corner of your eye. I am constantly hyper-vigilant now. I check every lock in my apartment 3 times before going to bed. I installed a heavy-duty deadbolt on my front door, just like the one at the cabin. It gives me a little peace of mind, but I know it wouldn't stop them if they really wanted to get in. Just remember my story the next time you feel a chill in the air when the woods get too quiet. The next time you feel like you're being watched from the shadows. Trust your instincts, because you might not be imagining it. You might just be the next person they decide to watch.